morning. My name is Captain Kelly Muniz, Commanding Officer of Media Relations Division. Thank you for joining us today for our year-end press conference. Available to you post-event are going to be our 2023 crime and initiatives, which are on the table over there to the left, as well as the 2023 homicide report. We're going to begin with Chief Michael Moore, followed by Mayor Karen Bass, and we will go to questions. After that, we will have others available for side interviews to include Spanish. Thank you. Chief Michael Moore.
Captain Muniz, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. First, let me thank Mayor Bass for attending today and for your ardent support of the men and women of this department and for the focus that you've had in your first year on public safety. It has made a difference in Los Angeles, and I'm happy to report the results of that investment are showing true returns. To the members of the media, as was stated, we're going to provide you two reports on crime and initiatives for 2023, the homicide report, but also I will reference you to our strategic plan that's been released earlier. It contains much more detail regarding our strategies, measures of effectiveness, and the path going forward. Overall, Los Angeles in 2023 achieved a 3% reduction in violent crime, experiencing reductions in every category, with just over 1,000 fewer victims of violent crime here in our city. Most significant was the success of seeing 65 fewer homicides, which is a 17% reduction. Additionally, in the second year in a row, we had not only fewer homicides, but we also had 127 fewer shooting victims. Those 127 fewer shooting victims, each of human life, is a 4-year low. And we're proud of that reduction in overall shooting violence. Our analysis of our homicides, when we look to see where these reductions occurred, we see a 26% reduction in gang-related homicides, which is also a first for this city, where in less than half of our homicides in 2023 were identified as being gang-related. Additionally, I'm proud of our work by our homicide detectives, gang enforcement details, our fugitive details, resulting in a 76% homicide clearance rate, essentially matching the rates from 2022 and a significant improvement from 2021. In detailing the other reductions in violence, we also saw marked reductions in smash and grab robberies and follow-home robberies, directly tied to the effectiveness of our focused task forces working with our business communities, with overall reductions in robbery just under 5%. Our metropolitan officers working in their crime impact teams with our divisional detectives in place of uniform patrols supported countless investigations across the city, resulting in 279 felony arrests and 413 firearms being recovered, including 59 ghost guns. Now, a challenging trend that we have seen on the rise is in property crime, where we saw a year-over-year increase of 3%. Those increases in residential and commercial burglaries, which began towards the second half of the year, but also auto theft and retail theft. On the residential burglary front, the department's working to improve the coordination and the exchange of information related to the South American residential burglary crews that are operating across not just this region, but across this nation. This effort includes bringing our federal law enforcement partners together with local agencies, and many of them, as many of these high-end burglaries, these residential burglaries are occurring in this region, and then they move to an additional state and across the country. And essentially, as local agencies are making arrests, identifying those responsible, and while they're being filed on and warrants are sought and obtained, they simply move across the country and continue their modus operandi of targeting high-end residential places. Regarding the increase in auto theft, we are also a victim of a national phenomenon of thieves that are targeting certain models of Kia and Hyundais. And those increases in those two car makes and models is dominating our increase in auto theft. Information on this is in 2019, Kia and Hyundai models represented less than 4% of all auto thefts citywide. In 2023, that percentage has grown to just under 30% of all auto thefts. A significant influence in driving up the auto theft rates by 68% in the city of Los Angeles since 2019. For example, in 2023, there were more than 2,400 additional Hyundais and Kias that were stolen from the year earlier. If that back-to-back increase had been interrupted and had not occurred, we actually would have seen a 7% decrease in overall auto theft rates in the city of Los Angeles. So this circumstance points out to the critical need for those vehicle owners to take advantage of anti-theft products, working with our manufacturers, as well as making sure that our prosecutors are filing and prosecuting the habitual offenders that are targeting these vehicles. Each of these vehicles many times are owned and operated by residents that's their only means of transportation to and from work, to and from medical appointments, or getting their children back and forth to school. Regarding organized retail thefts, the Organized Retail Theft Task Force, made up of a coalition of agencies across the LA region and the state, include California Highway Patrol, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Pasadena, local agencies. And all of us have come together to target this recent surge. And what we've seen is since August, more than 600 arrests, and we recovered 29 firearms, and importantly, recovered more than $5.5 million in property. These arrests range from organized high-value thefts to the more common shoplifter, and often involve serial and habitual offenders. Our work does continue with the California Attorney General and the LA District Attorney and City Attorney to counter the chronic and habitual offender with meaningful prosecutions to counter the misconception of a lack of consequences. And just yesterday, I met with the U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada and the FBI Director Don Elway to talk about the federal government's involvement using the Hobbs Act to target serial bandits that are targeting these retailers in an organized fashion. In summary, I'm proud of the work of all of our people, department-wide, improving the safety of our communities as well as building trust in those communities despite a significant smaller workforce. Their persistent focus on building partnerships with our community to prevent the incidence of crime, as well as to build trust and their relentless pursuit of our personnel working with our communities to identify those responsible for these crimes is impressive. Simply put, our people matter. Their dedication, their ingenuity, and their partnerships are showing results. Additionally, I'm proud of our people's strategy to build and bolster trust in our communities with purposeful outreach and engagement, which we know is essential in preventing crime, as well as identifying those responsible. The most recent LMU Community Sentiment Survey across Los Angeles showed that the most trusted group other than their own neighbors are their local police. These survey results also show back-to-back improvements in their relationship with our people as they go about identifying that also much more work remains in this area. Certainly this engagement and trust building has been improved by lessons learned and strategies employed by our nationally recognized Community Safety Partnership Bureau over the past decade. In addition to seeing double-digit reductions in shooting violence across the 10 sites within CSPB, the model has helped inform our local commands on strategies that improve the relationship between local residents and police with expanded critical community engagement and ownership in working to improve community safety. Also critical has been the support of Mayor Bass and our City Council to rebuild our staffing, replace worn-out equipment and cars, modernize our technology, and provide additional resources to target emerging crime trends. Additionally, Mayor Bass's work in deepening the investment in added community interventionists and programming has been critical in quelling further street violence and in saving lives. Finally, the Mayor's Inside Safe initiative, which the department has fully supported, has provided expanded interim and permanent housing, identifying and removing our most dangerous and entrenched encampments, while getting homeless individuals inside housing and out of harm's way. In addition to cleaner streets, we're seeing safer communities with a nearly 10% reduction in Part 1 crime involving homeless individuals, reductions in every category of violent crime, and 40 fewer homicides this last year, representing more than half of our reduction in overall homicides for the city of Los Angeles. So there's much more work to be done, and I'm proud of the measurable results that's been achieved. But I also recognize that the perception of safety remains a concern across this great city. Our commitment is to address that perception as well as the increased gun violence that we see far too much of still on our streets, particularly in comparison to the pre-pandemic levels of crime in the city, which, as a reminder, were historic lows. So an example of when I talk about the perception of safety and the increased gun violence is when we look at the crime of robbery. When you look at, well, we've had a tremendous impact on flash robberies, on flash mobs, and on smash and grabs and follow-home robberies. Robberies this last year dropped 10% over the period between 2023 and 2019. But most Angelenos don't feel that way with what they have seen on television and what they've experienced, sometimes tragically, firsthand. A significant influence on that is that while robberies are overall down 10% since in that comparison period, they're up 16% in that same period involving gun violence, involving firearms. Today, robberies involving a firearm represent more than 30% of robberies overall in the city of Los Angeles. That number used to be 15 to 20%. And every time, as a thought of perception of safety, when a person is confronted by a gun in some type of act of street violence or otherwise, it leaves a lasting scar. So our effort is going to be to address that head on and recognize that the exponential threat is there, but we also need to identify who's trafficking these guns, who's providing them, and also ensure that when a gun is used in a crime, that the available enhancements and the severity of prosecutions and punishment for that are strengthened. Only with the result of that will we see criminals resort to other means other than resorting to an all too available gun. Now, the other front that we have as we confront 2024 head on is that 2023 saw a significant increase in traffic fatalities, fatal hit and runs, as well as fatal pedestrian and bicycle collisions. Our strategic plan has called out this untenable circumstance that is threatening our communities, as well as the city, or as the city experienced more traffic fatalities this last year than it did homicides. As the department focuses its uniform and traffic officers to increase enforcement of speed violations in our most impacted communities, driving while impaired and solving hit and run collisions, we will also continue to work closely with our transportation community partners to address this head on with their resources, as well as seeking harsher penalties and consequences for instances of street racing that result in injury or death, as well as other blatant regards for community safety. In closing, I'm proud of the work that we've seen. I'm proud of the work that we've seen both by our rank and file, our detectives, our specialized resources, as well as our work with communities across Los Angeles for a safer Los Angeles. As we move into 2024, I'm excited to see that the department is going to continue to work on this focused effort of community safety and trust building by focusing on our strategic plan and our initiatives that include building and deepening public trust in the perception of safety, pursuing crime reduction, particularly gun violence, reduction of burglaries and residential and theft-related crimes, improving traffic safety with the immediate focus on reducing fatal traffic collisions involving hit and runs, as well as resulting fatals from driving while impaired and excessive speed. Rebuilding our workforce with the support of the mayor as well as the city council is critical as we amplify our results moving forward and improve our service times to not only urgent calls but also routine calls, and simply just the availability of officers on the street to be seen and to engage the public, a public that at times worries that the relationship with their officers is impaired by the lack of their ability time to interact and engage. We also must modernize and continue to modernize our legacy technology systems to improve efficiencies and provide our people with more time to be in the field, as well as continue our emphasis on maintaining the training and readiness exercising following the lessons learned from the 2020 civil unrest and after action report, and as important as any other initiative, and that is to invest in our employees, their wellness and their well-being. Again, as I stated earlier, we have our strategic plan that has specific initiatives, measures of effectiveness, and milestones going forward. And I will refer members of the media and others, community members, that you can find this report on LAPD online, electronically, and we'll have some copies of it available for us today. And with that, I conclude my remarks, and I want to now introduce Mayor Bass, a woman who, in her pursuit of this mayor of what I feel is the greatest city in America, was committed to improving public safety as well as addressing head-on this terrible, most humanitarian crisis of our generation, which is those experiencing homelessness. The combination of those two fronts, she has done, in my view, exceedingly well. And in her first year, she has made marked differences both in public safety as well as improving the circumstances of safety in our communities, as well as saving, I believe, lives of those that have found, we have found the ability to find housing, whether it be interim or permanent, and alternatives to the circumstances in which she met when she started her tenure as the mayor of this city. So, Mayor, thank you for that. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to your remarks.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. Let me begin by congratulating you, Chief, for your leadership and for this report today. I want to congratulate you, and I also want to congratulate the women and men of the Los Angeles Police Department. And as the Chief said, coming in as mayor, I was very clear that my #1 job was keeping Angelenos safe. And through my first year, we've taken urgent, proactive steps to ensure the safety of all Angelenos. So I want to talk about a few other things that we've done. I also want to appreciate the Chief's comments acknowledging that if you've been a victim of crime or if there has been criminal activity or circumstances in your neighborhood, regardless of the statistics, regardless of this good report, you might not feel that way. But we are addressing it. We took urgent action to address the LAPD hiring and retention crisis. One of the things that we found, well, I found, I'm sure the Chief has known this all along, which is LAPD has the finest training around, and so many officers would come in through the training and immediately get recruited to other departments. And it was very clear, in order for us to expand and retain the officers we had to address their salaries. We gave raises, and we also gave bonuses to officers who were later in their career so that they wouldn't leave early. We know that these raises were expensive, but for the nation's second largest city, there are some cities like Chicago that has a population much smaller than LA, but a much larger police department. And as I've gone around the city this year and years previous, you will hear residents say, it takes so long for there to be a response. Well, it does take so long for there to be a response when the force is depleted. And so it was critical for us to increase the number of officers, but it was also critical for us to retain officers. And so because of bonuses that we award in later years, there's early indications that optional retirement has slowed. So in late August, LAPD reported over 1,000 people applied to the department, and this is the largest number of applications in a single month since September of 2020. The Chief also mentioned that we are taking a comprehensive approach in addition to addressing crime, preventing crime. So last year we created the Office of Community Safety, which includes unprecedented investments in community-led efforts to increase safety and well-being. The office has distributed $50 million to community-based organizations to provide violence prevention and intervention, as well as diversion and anti-recidivism services to help Angelenos who have been involved in the justice system successfully re-enter and stay in communities after being incarcerated. I know when I was running for the office, I was very concerned about the homicide rate and the lack of homicides that were resolved. And I am happy to say that this year there has been a marked increase in resolving homicides, in catching the criminals and holding them accountable. Another program that we expanded this year is the Circle program, which is another tool in the city's toolbox to prevent crime. So the Circle program sends mental health teams for calls, especially homeless-related calls, which then allows LAPD officers to address serious and violent crime. I often say that over the years, in our city as well as in our country, we have divested from a lot of community-based programs and health and social services. When we divest, when we don't fund programs like that, things fall through the cracks, and it has been unfair for far too long that we expect police officers to pick up the pieces and address social and health issues such as homelessness, substance abuse, etc. So in the last 14 months, the Circle program has effectively responded to over 9,000 calls for service. And again, that saves LAPD resources so that officers can be responsive to neighborhood concerns. All of this together has made an impact, and as the Chief reported, compared to last year, violent crime and homicides are both down. A few months ago in August, the Chief launched an organized retail task force to address why some Angelenos feel unsafe in our shopping centers, especially the smash and grabs. I remember, Chief, when the task force was first formed, there was concern that it was a task force to study the issue. That was never the intent. The task force that the chief set up has absolutely reduced the smash and grabs. There has been a 33% reduction in flash robberies, and the task force has conducted 109 search warrants and effected 128 arrests, of which they've recovered 15 firearms. The task force has also recovered more than $150,000 in stolen property, and we've made good progress, but we know that there is still much to do. All of this, I will say, has been made possible because of our chief. As I said 2 weeks ago, Chief Moore's leadership and legacy, of course, extends past just this last year. He has led our department through tumultuous times, a worldwide pandemic in which he implemented creative strategies to combat spiking crime throughout the country. And as mentioned, there was a difference in crime as we all went through the pandemic. When it seemed like there were 3 news stories every night about follow-home robberies, Chief Moore's response was helped crack down on the organized aspects of these crimes and why they went way down. His work, of course, prior to becoming chief should also be acknowledged and celebrated. Rising through the ranks of police officer, detective, sergeant, and lieutenant, working various patrols, investigative, and administrative assignments before being promoted to department leadership. Over the years, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, he earned the Medal of Valor, the Police Medal, the Police Star, and more. He has served our city with distinction and has always worked to ensure that Los Angeles was prepared for the World Cup, the Olympics, and beyond. And so when we have this report today, it's no small matter to me. I think it has been consistent with your legacy as chief that we make this very positive report. So I want to close with a reminder to all that keeping our communities safe is not just the job of the police, but the job of all of us working together. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions? Let's go here, and then we'll go to Steve.
Thank you. There's no information here on OIS's use of force, rapes.
Yep.
You talked about violent crime being down, but Part 1 crimes are up. What's up?
So on the use of force, we will provide a report by March 1st, as we do each year since 2015. That will report on the number of not just officer-involved shootings, but all uses of force across the organization. So last year, that number was 34. The year before that, it was 31. The year before that, it was 37. 34 represents, I believe, the 4th lowest number in more than 30 years. During my tenure, we saw 26 and 27 officer-involved shootings in 2018 and 19. That number rose again to the 37 I referenced. We're very mindful. The analysis of those 34 officer-involved shootings will be included in that report, as well as our strategies that we've implemented over the course of the year. Those reports build 1 year after the next on the evolution of the use of force. Our efforts in the use of force, we're not shying away from this. I referenced our continued training and investment in our people so that their ability to de-escalate troubling and chaotic and troubling and trying circumstances minimizes and whenever possible eliminates the use of deadly force. This year, we've had 2 officer-involved shootings in the month of January. Both instances involved armed individuals with firearms. Both at this stage have been alleged to have pointed those firearms towards the officers and resulted in an officer-involved shooting. I'm happy to report that officers rendering aid and getting prompt medical attention, both those individuals have survived and are facing serious felony charges for the crimes that they committed and the violence they conducted in our efforts to apprehend them. So we're not shying away from that at all. You mentioned rapes. Rapes are down, sexual assaults are down this year as they were last, and they're detailed in the report. That's another one of our violent crime categories. In regards to the increase, 3%, just over 3% increase in overall Part 1 crimes, I want to draw your attention to really all of us, it's a bit of a disservice about how the nation captures crime. And what Part 1 crimes, which were formed nearly 100 years ago, is 7 categories of crime. And when you consider crime from 1 year to the next, it gives the value of a theft of water from someone's water hose in the front of their house the same value, numeric value, as a homicide. And certainly we would all agree that the instances of violence are much more serious and much more long-lasting, having a lasting impact on this, not just a sense of safety, but the reality of safety. So Part 1 crimes, the largest category of Part 1 crimes is theft. This last year, I think it's 3.5%, if you get down to the decimal points on Part 1 crime, were largely influenced by increases in auto theft and increases in petty theft, and then also increases in the latter part of the year in burglary. We're not shying away from that at all. I made a very lengthy remark, and we're happy to go into greater detail about this. We do want to characterize thefts, for instance, that when you look at thefts in comparison to last year, you're looking at it as we come out of the pandemic, retail thefts and individual thefts dropped tremendously during the pandemic years. So when we look at thefts today versus 2019, which is kind of our waterline of what was pre-pandemic as far as the day-to-day safety of Los Angeles, if you look at that area, thefts are essentially even or equal, except for the areas of organized retail theft. And then those are the areas where we are seeing, and why we're devoting resources is to that type of focus and energy. So that's the nature of why we're presenting this information, and we're happy to respond further. I have with me today the Assistant Chief of the Office of Operations, Dominic Choi, as well as the Assistant Chief of the Office of Special Operations, Blake Chow. Both of them have ready resources with them that can get deeper dive into this, and we certainly expect in the days and weeks ahead that the media will have further attention on this, and we'll be happy to respond to it.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you.
Good morning.
Could you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned something about the public's perception of crime versus what the numbers show.
Sure.
Are you saying people are they're overreacting, or can you clarify that a little bit?
Well, I absolutely don't believe that they're overreacting. I think that the sense of safety, the sense of one's safety is one's own perceptions. To tell someone, don't worry about that, there's nothing to see here, I think is insensitive. I think we need to acknowledge it, we need to recognize it, but we also need to frame it within a context of where we are today in regards to where we were last year and over a period of time. We are safer today in overall violence and gun violence than we were last year. But yet, when you look back to the pre-pandemic levels, we still have far too much violence. So that's an effort to frame people that the work of government, the trust in law enforcement, and in their public's investment in us is going to make for a safer communities. So don't give up. We have to be purveyors of hope, and we have to recognize when we fall short, but we also need to champion when good work and partnerships and collaborations make a difference. I'll close by saying, when we look at, for instance, our community safety partnerships, one of the greatest values we've learned from that engagement is the sense of safety actually overrides the actual level of violence in that community. And so building trust, building engagement, having conversations that normalize people's sense of safety or lack thereof, and addresses that we care, that we're working together, and we're unified in this shared responsibility, improves people's sense that this is a community that's going to work, that's worth investing in, and certainly it's one that reaches government's approval because public service is actually addressing their needs.
This is your last meeting of this kind, your last report. Do you feel like, given everything you know now and the stats you've been quoting the last few years, are you leaving the department in better shape than you took it over?
Oh, I believe so. I mean, well, I'll say this. This is an equation, right? This is my efforts, my family's efforts, the organization's efforts versus the challenges and the threats and the crisis that we engaged in. This is an organization that says, are you leaving it in better shape from staffing? No. I mean, we're down well over 1,000 personnel and sworn in the civilian ranks as well. Are we leaving it better in regards to community trust? Yes. Are we leaving it better in the sense of equipment and technology that we've invested these last 5 years in? Yes. When I started this position, more than half of our desktop computers were more than 8 years old. We've updated our technology. We made specific investments by the foundation to do that. We've invested in the LMU studies, which prior to 2018 weren't an annual basis. And we're working with city government, the support of then Mayor Garcetti, the continued support of now Mayor Bass, is allowing us to get community sentiment surveys to understand where are areas that we need to build and bolster trust. So I do believe that I leave it better than I found it, yet I also recognize this has been acknowledged. Nobody could have anticipated these last 5 years, and I have taken every effort that I can and pulled on every bit of knowledge and a team that has been relentless in their support of this department. And while we not all have agreed, we've all agreed about one thing, and that is how do we work for the safety of this community and how do we do that in the most effective way possible. And I leave, as I prepare to leave at the end of February, satisfied that I've left it on the field.
If I may,
Yes.
Frank Mechanics. Happy New Year, by the way. Wanted to ask, first housekeeping question, what is the current sworn ranks employed by this department?
8,960.
And I remember covering a press conference, I think it was by Zoom, because it was during the pandemic, where you warned people in Los Angeles, that when you go out, don't wear a nice watch, don't get too fancied up, don't make yourself an easy target. Has that advice changed?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we show here flash robberies, but if we show you a similar graph on follow home robberies, you'll see an absolute, almost the elimination of them. Now, do they still occur? We had one happen just the other day, but they are a rarity. When we started this, this task force, geez, I think it was 2 years ago, it was a daily affair. And we had 40, 50 of these going on a month. We had homicides, we had shooting violence. So what I believe in both these instances, and I look forward to us taking on this terrible instances of fatal hit and run collisions and DUIs and resulting in fatals and these other loss of life, is this is an organization that constantly looks to improve, that constantly changes its focus and its energies to address emerging and most persistent problems. And I'm proud of the work. Lastly, we've have to do this with a much more diminished workforce. So service levels have changed. For instance, today we had this last year 130,000 plus online reports. Those are alternatives to what previously were officers going out and taking accident investigations and various other types of crime or crime investigations, low-level crimes. We did that to save that time so that we could stay focused on the most pressing issues. So that innovation, I see agencies across America today that are adopting things that we've adopted over the last 5 years, that I'm proud of the work, the ingenuity of our people. And what I guarantee this to LAPD, to the people of LA, is that as the next leader, the interim chief and the permanent chief are appointed, that will continue. I think the future is bright for the city and for this department.
Let me ask one follow-up on that. You mentioned the proliferation and increased use of gun violence, guns on the streets, more people with guns. I know personally, I'd rather have my car stolen than be confronted with by somebody with a gun. So if there were guns on the streets or more people using guns to commit crimes, are they becoming older, or is it just because there are more guns?
So we are evolving. I will say that 2 years ago, we were not seeing, for instance, gun enhancements on gun charges. So people were arrested for gun violence, arrested for whether an assault with a deadly weapon or a robbery, and we were being frustrated because of prosecuting standards that did not file readily available enhancements. That has changed, and that change, I believe, is a influence. It's a nudge to encourage criminals, offenders, not to carry guns. I'm proud of the work by then City Attorney Furyk, continued by our current City Attorney Feinstein Soto on ghost guns, on prohibiting polymer 80 manufacturer from importing guns to this region. When you look at our ghost gun progress, this year you see a reduction in ghost guns recovered. You see a slight reduction in the number of firearms seized, still far too high over historic standards. Far too many guns are out there. But I believe that the legislative changes that impacted the manufacture and provisioning of those guns, in concert with us, Metropolitan Crime Impact Teams, focusing on identifying gun traffickers and making those arrests and using the federal and state charges, are having an impact and are deterring further acts of people relying upon guns. Lastly, though, we recognize as a country we're far too violent, we're far too reliant on firearms, and we are still continuing to sell and manufacture and distribute more guns historically than we have in decades. And that is a troubling trend for me. And I'll get to your question, lastly will say, as a caution to you, is that the future on gun violence is troubling because of a recent last year's decision by the Supreme Court allowing individuals to carry concealed weapon permits basically on a basis of good character. This will be controversial. I'm sure I'll get a pushback, and I recognize that. But we are issuing hundreds of concealed weapon permits to members of the public here in Los Angeles as they are across this state and across this country. And when you look at California, historically it's gun laws. We've been a Brady A state. Gun violence in the state has been one of the lowest in the country because of the fact that we've had higher restrictions. As that changes, I think it's going to be even more important that prosecutors and others focus that when people involve the use of a gun in any type of altercation, dispute, or circumstance, that we have to deter that through not just education, but through holding people accountable. Over here.
Yeah, a question regarding homeless encampments, Inside Safe. Mayor, I know when you launched Inside Safe, you had said we need to get rid of the tents, and there's obviously a lot of reasons why you decided to do Inside Safe. But in terms of crime data, we know that criminal activity sometimes is spilled over to the neighborhoods where the encampments are. What was released today? What does that tell you? 'Cause it still seems like there's people kind of in denial about what goes on in some of these encampments in terms of crime, and when you see the numbers after Inside Safe cleanups, what does that tell you about the work that you're doing at Inside Safe homeless encampments in terms of crime?
Well, anecdotally now, although I do think that we can make it factual by looking at police calls before and after, and we haven't done that, but anecdotally, an encampment that has been cleared, and not all encampments have criminal activity, but the ones that did, even petty crimes, absolutely have decreased. And when I say it's anecdotal, I'm referring to the businesses, the schools, and the neighbors who report a relief once the encampment is gone and the people are housed.
And if I can, and let me follow up just with that. We'll, Commander Gisela Espinoza is our homeless coordinator. We actually have the data that we'll provide you for Inside Safe locations before and after. Calls for service go down and crime goes down. It's just that simple.
That's why when you're thinking about the expense, because obviously Inside Safe costs a lot of money, we have to look at how much it costs with people on the street. Whether we are talking about police calls, fire calls, businesses that are compromised, etc., it is very, very expensive in the city for people to be on the street.
Madam Mayor, you know, kind of back on another topic, you just gave the chief a very glowing report, an evaluation for his performance. Looking forward now, what are you looking for in the next chief?
Well, I'm definitely looking for a chief that would continue the legacy of Chief Moore. Crime going down, we want to see that continue. Community involvement and response going up. Community-based policing, a responsive police department to work to collaborating with communities. But I will tell you that in the upcoming weeks, you'll see me be much more specific as we appoint an interim and also as we begin the process of looking for a new chief. You should know that yesterday I had a meeting at one of the police stations. Today I'm talking to officers about what they want to see, as well as going to the community. So obviously I will have my opinions and my perspective, but I want to be far more inclusive than just my thoughts.
Do you think that the next chief should be from within the department, or are you open to getting someone from outside?
I'm open to both. And let me just tell you that this is not just involving the police department. So I believe in the nation's second largest city, we need to look for the best and the brightest. And so, for example, we needed a general manager at the airport. We did a national search. We employed a national search firm. We are doing that, in the process of doing that right now with the Department of Water and Power, and we will do the same with the police department. So now the Police Commission is evaluating search firms that specifically focus on law enforcement to select a firm that will do a national search. I am absolutely supportive of somebody from inside the department as well as outside. What I'm most supportive of is the best and the brightest.
In 2020, obviously, there were calls to defund the police. Are you now, it looks like you've poured money into the department. You talked about retention bonuses, raising raises, things like that. Does that not work? Does defunding the police not work? Are you more?
Well, I mean, that's not relevant to me because I've never supported that. But I do want to address something that you raised earlier, which was officer-involved shootings, which is of tremendous concern to me. You know, a few minutes ago, I referenced how we as a society have divested from social programs, and mental health is number one. And I think you could look at a number of the officer-involved shootings, and I remember this when I was in Congress, and I was looking at this nationally. And there is a percentage, and a rather large percentage, of officer-involved shootings, whether it's in Los Angeles or any other city, that involve people who are in a mental health crisis. But when you divest from services, you have people who go into crisis. You can prevent those crises for people who are experiencing mental illness. And I'm happy to say that this March, there will be a proposition on the ballot, Proposition 1, to finally build the facilities as well as provide the services so that we can prevent an awful lot of crime, and we can prevent what sometimes deteriorates into an officer-involved shooting because the person has become violent.
Actually, one more question for the chief. Chief, for years now, arrests, traffic stops, and other indicators of proactive policing have been trending downwards. And as you said yourself, staffing is down in the department. Can you speak specifically to how the department has contributed to the decline in crime?
So I want to point you to one of the things that we began years ago, back to, I think it was 2015 or so, is that we actually track the number of hours in the public that our personnel are out there. And it's on page 7 of the report, and I'll refer you to that. What I'm proud about that graph is that it recognizes that when you cut 1,000 personnel, sworn personnel, that you can't have the number of field officers, you can't have the number of people in the street. When you see an increase this from 22 to 23, that's an attribute of us optimizing everything possible to work in the street, to have public engagement, to be involved in our communities, and not just responding to calls, but also in that engagement. Secondly, it's also the investment of Mayor Bass and the City Council that has augmented our staffing by allowing us to work on overtime details for these specific task forces and on very specific issues. Lastly, I referenced metropolitan details specifically, because in 2018, as I began my tenure as chief, we shifted them away from crime suppression, where we had hundreds of officers working in sectors within divisions that were most impacted by violent crime, and they were conducting high volumes of stops built on suspicion that the person may be involved in a crime, a violent crime, just was involved or was about to be involved. What we saw from that, and as we did analysis on that, is that in 2019 we shifted away from it. And when we shift away from it, we move those teams into follow-up investigations in support of detectives at the local level, identifying further leads and tips to identify the violent offenders and the serial bandits, and to do that necessary follow-up work that detectives were unable to because of their staffing shortage. What we've seen in that shift is that the recovery of guns, the identification of violent offenders and serial predators has now increased, and that it's not the number of arrests, it's the quality and value of those arrests and the value of those encounters. So we've shifted that. The onset of the pretext stop policy that started 2 years ago under the leadership of then Commission President Eileen Decker and Steve Soboroff as the Vice President, and that entire commission challenged the department to come up with a policy that would reduce the wholesale or the ability to stop an individual on a minor infraction with little or no other information, and to refine that stop that it was limited to instances in which the officer could provide additional information about a violent or serious crime. What we saw was a significant reduction in enforcement stops for vehicle equipment violations, and at the same time a continuation of the recovery of guns and the arrest of individuals involved in serious crime. So this department has been thoughtful, it's been strategic, and it continues to deliver, listening to the public about new and alternative ways in which to go out and build trust by ensuring that when our work is in the field, that we're building relationships, and we show that we're interested in protecting people, not by looking at everyone as a suspect or offender, but identifying those that are and bringing them before the criminal justice system, while at the same time we've maintained our work on alternatives, on diversion. We lead the county in juvenile diversions for arrests when appropriate. And so these are the types of strategies that I know the next chief will continue. We lead the country in 21st century policing and its practices and techniques, and we're not done. And I'm proud of the work of our men and women. And as I leave, I know that we're going to be in good hands under the leadership of this mayor, as well as the Board of Police Commissioners as they go about their most serious task. Thank you all.